Legends are usually born in books and films, yet there are stories so incredible that reality itself sounds more fantastic than any invention. Imagine a man whom fate threw into a hopeless abyss, deprived him of the very essence of a pilot. Yet he refused to admit defeat. His path led through frozen forests, through despair and pain, through choices that could chill even the strongest heart. He found himself where anyone else would have surrendered, but at that very point, his real life began. His destiny held humiliation, hidden doubts, and scenes long concealed from the public eye. What helped him transform personal tragedy into victory and turn the impossible into reality, we will uncover step by step the darkest and brightest pages of his life. And what you discover at the end will hardly leave you indifferent. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You are not here by accident. Alexey Petrovich Maresyev entered the world on May 20th, 1916, in Kamyshin, a modest town along the Volga River. His father died when Alexey was barely 3, leaving his mother Ekaterina to raise 3 sons alone. Poverty wasn't just their circumstance, it was their defining reality. The widow Maresyeva worked as a cleaning woman, scrubbing floors and washing laundry for families who could afford such luxuries. Her boys learned early that survival required resourcefulness and stubbornness in equal measure. While other children played, they foraged for firewood, mended their own clothes, and shared single meals among 4 people. Alexey stood out not for his size. He remained small and wiry throughout childhood, but for his peculiar relationship with obstacles. When neighborhood boys excluded him from games, he invented his own. When winter cold made their house unbearable, he taught himself to ignore discomfort through sheer mental discipline. His teachers noticed something unusual about the quiet boy who rarely spoke, but never missed school, even when sickness kept his brothers home. Alexey absorbed knowledge like parched earth drinks water, particularly anything involving mechanics or movement. He dismantled broken clocks, studied bird flight patterns, and built elaborate contraptions from scraps. By age 12, he had developed an obsession with aviation that bordered on mania. Every aircraft that flew over Kamyshin received his complete attention. He memorized engine sounds, wing configurations, flight patterns. When Soviet pilots visited local schools for recruitment talks, Alexey positioned himself in the front row, absorbing every detail of their stories. His mother watched this fixation with growing concern. Flying was for the sons of engineers and party officials, not for cleaning women's children. But Alexey seemed incapable of considering alternatives. He sketched aircraft designs in notebook margins, carved wooden planes with meticulous detail, and spoke of his future as a pilot with unsettling certainty. At 18, Maresyev faced the harsh mathematics of Soviet aviation selection. Thousands applied for each available training slot. Physical requirements eliminated most candidates immediately. Perfect vision, exceptional coordination, unblemished health records. Academic standards cut the remainder to a tiny fraction. Maresyev failed his first medical examination. His vision, while adequate for normal life, fell slightly below pilot requirements. Most candidates accepted such verdicts as final. Maresyev treated them as temporary setbacks requiring creative solutions. He spent months performing eye exercises, adjusting his diet, and memorizing eye charts through repetition. When he returned for re-examination, he had somehow improved his test scores enough to pass. Whether through genuine improvement or clever memorization, the results spoke for themselves. Aviation school in Bataisk proved more challenging than anticipated. The curriculum demanded mathematical precision that his rural education hadn't provided. While classmates with university backgrounds grasped aerodynamics intuitively, Maresyev struggled with concepts that seemed designed for minds trained in abstract thinking. He compensated through relentless practice. While others socialized or rested, he worked through flight manuals until late hours. He built mental models of aircraft systems, visualizing engine components and control mechanisms with obsessive detail. His instructors noted his mechanical aptitude but questioned whether he possessed the quick reflexes modern combat required. First solo flights revealed Maresyev's true abilities. In the air, all his awkwardness vanished. He flew with instinctive understanding that textbooks couldn't teach. His aircraft became an extension of his body, responding to subtle inputs that other pilots hadn't learned to perceive. By 1939, he had earned assignment to the 18th Fighter Aviation Regiment near the Soviet-Finnish border. The posting offered real flying experience, but little indication of the catastrophe approaching Europe. June 22, 1941, shattered Soviet illusions about preparedness and defensive capabilities. German forces struck with coordinated precision that left entire air regiments destroyed on the ground. Within hours, the balance of air power shifted dramatically toward the invaders. Maresyev's regiment scrambled to respond with outdated tactics and inferior equipment. Their Polikarpov Amputated fighters, sturdy but obsolete, faced German Messerschmitts with advanced engines and superior armament. Most Soviet pilots were flying their final missions within days of war's beginning. Combat revealed qualities in Maresyev that peacetime training hadn't detected. While experienced pilots fell victim to panic or overconfidence, he approached each sortie with methodical calculation. He studied German tactics, memorized their aircraft capabilities, and developed personal strategies for surviving encounters with superior opponents. His flying style evolved toward patience and precision rather than aggressive heroics. He learned to wait for optimal positioning before engaging, to conserve ammunition for high-probability shots, and to disengage when circumstances turned unfavorable. These weren't cowardly instincts, but survival mathematics applied to aerial combat. By early 1942, Maresyev had achieved 4 confirmed victories against German aircraft, a respectable tally for pilots operating under desperate conditions. His regiment commanders praised his reliability and growing tactical expertise. Fellow pilots respected his judgment and often sought his advice on combat techniques. But personal achievements mattered little against the broader disaster unfolding across Soviet airspace. German forces advanced with terrifying momentum, destroying airfields, capturing supplies, and eliminating organized resistance. The war had become a struggle for national survival, with every pilot flying missions that might determine their country's fate. April 4, 1942, began like countless other combat missions. Maresyev's regiment received orders to provide air cover for Soviet ground forces retreating near Novgorod. Intelligence reports suggested moderate German air activity in the area, nothing beyond their experience. Maresyev took off in his Yak-1 fighter with characteristic thoroughness, checking systems twice and reviewing tactical options. The aircraft felt responsive and reliable, a good sign for what promised to be another routine patrol mission. Enemy contact came without warning. A formation of German fighters appeared from cloud cover, positioned perfectly for attack. The Soviet pilots found themselves outnumbered and disadvantaged, forced into defensive maneuvering that played to German strengths. Maresyev engaged a Messerschmitt Bf-109 in turning combat, trying to exploit his aircraft's tighter turning radius. For several minutes, the two fighters circled each other in deadly ballet, each pilot seeking the split-second advantage that would determine survival. The German pilot proved exceptionally skilled. When Maresyev thought he had gained position, his opponent reversed course with perfect timing. Machine gun rounds stitched across the yak's engine cowling, sending metal fragments into the cockpit. Maresyev felt immediate pain in his legs, but maintained control as his engine began losing power. Smoke filled the cockpit, making navigation nearly impossible. The controls grew heavy, responding sluggishly to his inputs. With no altitude remaining for extended gliding, he faced the choice between attempting a controlled crash or certain death. He selected a clearing between pine trees, hoping soft snow might cushion the impact. The yak hit the ground at tremendous speed, cartwheeling through snow and debris. When motion finally stopped, Maresyev found himself trapped in wreckage, his legs pinned beneath twisted metal. Blood was soaking through his flight suit, and the silence felt absolute. Consciousness returned gradually, bringing with it the understanding of complete isolation. Maresyev's legs had been crushed in the crash, with bones protruding through torn flesh. No rescue aircraft circled overhead. No ground forces searched the area. He was alone in German-controlled territory, with injuries that should have been immediately fatal. The first day passed in semi-delirium as he struggled to free himself from the wreckage. His flight suit provided minimal protection against sub-zero temperatures. Snow continued falling, threatening to bury both pilot and aircraft beneath accumulating drifts. By the second day, Maresyev faced his fundamental choice. He could remain with the aircraft wreckage, conserving energy while waiting for rescue that might never come. Or he could attempt to reach Soviet lines by crawling across unknown territory with destroyed legs. Logic suggested staying put. His injuries made movement excruciating and dangerous. He had no maps, no compass, no supplies except melted snow for water. The distance to Soviet positions could be 5 kilometers or 50, impossible to determine from ground level. Maresyev chose movement, not because he calculated better survival odds, but because remaining stationary felt like surrender. He began dragging himself eastward through snow, using his arms to pull his body forward while his mangled legs trailed behind. The physical agony defied description. Each meter of progress required multiple rest periods to prevent unconsciousness from blood loss and exhaustion. Frostbite attacked his extremities, while internal injuries sent waves of nausea through his system. Days blurred into nights as he continued his impossible journey. He ate pine needles and bark when hunger became unbearable. Melted snow provided water but leached vital heat from his body. Wild animals investigated his scent trail but fortunately moved on without attacking. By the 10th day, infection had set into his wounds. Delirium came in waves, making navigation even more problematic. He began talking to imaginary companions, reliving childhood memories, and experiencing hallucinations that seemed more real than his actual surroundings. 2 local boys discovered him on the 18th day, barely conscious and hours from death. They alerted their village, whose residents faced their own terrible choice. Helping a Soviet pilot meant risking German retaliation if discovered. The villagers who found Maresyev carried him to the nearest Soviet field hospital, where military surgeons confronted injuries that challenged their experience and available resources. Both legs had sustained massive trauma during the crash, with extensive tissue death, bone fragmentation, and advanced infection threatening his entire system. The 18 days of exposure had created complications that transformed straightforward surgical decisions into life or death calculations. Chief Surgeon Alexander Terabinsky examined the damage with growing concern. Maresyev's right leg showed compound fractures with bone protruding through gangrenous tissue. The left leg had suffered crush injuries that destroyed circulation completely. Infection had spread through both limbs, creating toxicity that was poisoning his bloodstream and threatening organ failure. Standard medical protocols offered clear guidance for such cases. Immediate amputation of both legs below the knee represented Maresyev's only realistic chance for survival. Without radical surgery, sepsis would kill him within 48 hours. Even with amputation, his survival odds remained questionable given the advanced state of systemic infection. Terabinsky delivered the verdict with professional directness that avoided false hope or unnecessary drama. The surgeon explained that delaying the decision would eliminate any possibility of successful outcome. Military medicine demanded brutal efficiency that left little room for extended deliberation or emotional accommodation. Maresyev received the news with characteristic quietness that surprised medical staff accustomed to dramatic reactions from patients facing major amputations. He asked no questions about alternative treatments or second opinions. His only concern involved recovery timeline and the possibility of returning to flight duty. The medical team initially attributed his response to psychological shock. Preoperative preparation revealed additional complications that hadn't been immediately apparent. Malnutrition from his 18-day ordeal had weakened his immune system and reduced his body's ability to heal from major surgery. Blood tests showed anemia and protein deficiency that would complicate post-surgical recovery significantly. The amputation procedure itself proved more challenging than anticipated. Infection had spread higher into both legs than external examination suggested, requiring removal of additional tissue to ensure complete elimination of gangrenous material. Both limbs were amputated approximately 6 inches below the knee, leaving sufficient residual length for eventual prosthetic fitting. Post-operative complications began almost immediately. Maresyev developed high fever as his system fought residual infection, while simultaneously trying to heal from traumatic surgery. His condition remained critical for several days, as medical staff monitored for signs of continued sepsis or surgical site breakdown. Pain management presented ongoing challenges with limited pharmaceutical resources available at field hospitals. Morphine supplies were reserved for the most severe cases, leaving many patients to endure significant discomfort during recovery. Maresyev rarely requested pain medication, preferring to maintain mental clarity despite physical suffering. Fellow patients attempted to provide emotional support through shared stories of adaptation and resilience. They spoke of disabled veterans who had found meaningful civilian careers despite serious physical limitations. Maresyev listened politely to their encouragement, but seemed uninterested in their examples of successful adjustment to non-military life. The psychological impact of amputation manifested in ways that concerned medical staff. While some patients became depressed or angry, Maresyev exhibited unusual emotional detachment that suggested either exceptional coping mechanisms or dangerous denial of his changed circumstances. His responses to counseling attempts remained superficial and unconvincing. Physical therapy began as soon as surgical sites had healed sufficiently to permit mobility training. Standard protocols emphasized acceptance of limitations while building skills for basic civilian functionality. Maresyev approached these sessions with mechanical compliance that concerned therapists who expected more emotional engagement with his rehabilitation process. His first attempts at mobility using temporary prosthetic devices revealed the magnitude of challenges that lay ahead. The primitive artificial limbs available in 1942 were crude mechanical constructions that required tremendous upper body strength and coordination. Most patients struggled with basic walking, making advanced activities seem impossible. Medical staff recommended accepting discharge with full disability benefits that would provide comfortable civilian support. They explained that his service record and combat injuries qualified him for the highest level of assistance available to disabled veterans. Most patients in similar circumstances gratefully accepted such arrangements. Maresyev rejected all suggestions of medical retirement or civilian accommodation. He demanded detailed information about prosthetic technology, rehabilitation programs, and aviation medical standards. When doctors explained that no double amputee had ever been cleared for combat flying, he treated their statements as challenges to overcome rather than permanent limitations. His unauthorized exercise program began within weeks of surgery, violating medical recommendations about activity restrictions during healing. He performed increasingly complex movements designed to rebuild strength and coordination while adapting to prosthetic limitations. Medical staff found themselves unable to prevent his self-directed rehabilitation efforts. Maresyev's campaign to regain flight status began with systematic preparation that bordered on obsession. He studied medical literature about prosthetics, researched aviation requirements in other countries, and developed training regimens specifically designed for pilots with amputations. His first challenge involved mastering basic mobility with artificial limbs. Standard prosthetics of the 1940s were crude mechanical devices that required significant upper body strength and coordination. Most amputees used them for simple walking, but never achieved athletic capability. Maresyev approached prosthetic adaptation like learning to fly a new aircraft type. He analyzed each movement component, practiced basic maneuvers repeatedly, and gradually built complexity into his routines. Within months, he was running, jumping, and performing acrobatic exercises that amazed medical observers. Next came the bureaucratic battle. Soviet aviation medicine had no precedents for clearing double amputees for combat duty. Multiple medical boards examined his case, each reaching the same negative conclusion. Flight duty required split-second reflexes and perfect physical coordination that prosthetics couldn't provide. Maresyev treated each rejection as valuable intelligence about specific concerns he needed to address. When examiners questioned his pedal control ability, he demonstrated precise footwork using training devices. When they doubted his endurance, he completed extended physical tests that exceeded healthy pilot standards. His persistence gradually wore down official resistance. Senior commanders, impressed by his determination and tactical knowledge, began advocating for his return to flight duty. They argued that experienced pilots were desperately needed and that Maresyev's motivation might compensate for physical limitations. The breakthrough came when Maresyev was allowed to undergo flight testing under controlled conditions. He demonstrated that his artificial limbs could operate aircraft controls with precision equal to or exceeding that of healthy pilots. His years of preparation had paid off in measurable performance advantages. In June 1943, more than a year after his crash, Maresyev received clearance for return to combat operations. The achievement represented a victory over medical orthodoxy, bureaucratic resistance, and physical impossibility. Maresyev's return to the 353rd Fighter Aviation Regiment created immediate tension among pilots who questioned whether an amputee belonged in combat formation. Veteran aviators worried that his physical limitations might compromise squadron effectiveness during critical engagements. Some voiced concerns that accommodating his condition could endanger entire missions. Their skepticism extended beyond professional considerations to deeper psychological discomfort with his presence. Healthy pilots found his artificial limbs disturbing reminders of their own vulnerability. His determination to continue flying challenged assumptions about acceptable risk that helped them cope with daily mortality. Squadron Commander Major Ivan Alexeyev faced difficult decisions about integrating Maresyev into combat operations. Regulations provided no guidance for managing disabled pilots, while pressure from higher command emphasized utilizing experienced aviators regardless of physical condition. The tactical situation demanded every qualified pilot, but defining qualification had become problematic. Maresyev's first combat sortie took place during the massive air battles surrounding the Kursk offensive in July 1943. German forces had concentrated enormous air power to support their ground assault, creating the largest aerial engagements of the entire war. Soviet fighters faced overwhelming numerical disadvantage against experienced Luftwaffe units. The mission briefing revealed the desperate nature of their assignment. Multiple formations of German dive bombers were attacking Soviet armored reserves, while strong fighter escorts protected the attack aircraft. Squadron orders called for immediate engagement regardless of tactical disadvantage, reflecting the critical importance of preventing German air supremacy. Takeoff procedures felt familiar despite his long absence from combat operations. The Yak-7B fighter responded normally to control inputs, though Maresyev noticed subtle differences in pedal sensitivity that required minor technique adjustments. His prosthetics interfaced properly with cockpit systems that had been modified to accommodate his condition. Formation flying revealed no significant problems with his mechanical adaptations. Other pilots observed his aircraft handling with professional interest, noting that his flight path remained stable and precise. Whatever reservations they harbored about his physical condition, his technical competence appeared unimpaired by amputation. Enemy contact developed exactly as intelligence had predicted. German fighter formations engaged Soviet aircraft before they could reach the dive bombers, creating chaotic maneuvering combat that tested every pilot's abilities. The sky filled with aircraft executing desperate maneuvers, while tracer fire created deadly geometric patterns. Maresyev found himself engaged with a Focke-Wulf FW-190, a formidable opponent that outgunned and outperformed his Yak-7B in most flight regimes. The German pilot demonstrated exceptional skill, forcing defensive maneuvering that gradually consumed altitude and airspeed. Standard tactics seemed inadequate against such experienced opposition. His prosthetic limbs actually provided unexpected advantages during sustained combat maneuvering. While human legs tired under G-forces that prolonged turning fights created, his artificial limbs maintained consistent pedal pressure without fatigue. This mechanical reliability allowed precise rudder control during extended engagements. The tactical breakthrough came when Maresyev exploited his opponent's expectation of conventional pilot limitations. He maintained maximum performance turns longer than the German pilot anticipated, gradually gaining positional advantage through superior endurance rather than aircraft capability. The Focke-Wulf pilot broke off engagement when his tactical position became untenable. Victory came through patient application of lessons learned during his rehabilitation process. Just as he had overcome physical limitations through systematic preparation, aerial combat required similar methodical approaches that maximized strengths while minimizing weaknesses. His prosthetics were simply tools that required proper utilization. Post-mission analysis revealed that Maresyev had achieved 2 probable victories and 1 confirmed kill during his return engagement. More significantly, his aircraft handling and tactical judgment showed no degradation from pre-amputation capabilities. Medical concerns about his combat effectiveness proved unfounded when measured against actual performance. Squadron attitudes shifted dramatically following his successful mission. Pilots who had questioned his presence now sought his advice on combat techniques and tactical approaches. They recognized that his unique perspective, developed through overcoming seemingly impossible obstacles, offered insights that conventional training couldn't provide. His most celebrated engagement occurred on July 20, 1943, during continued fighting around the Kursk salient. German forces launched coordinated air attacks against Soviet defensive positions, employing massive formations that strained Soviet interception capabilities. Every available fighter was committed to preventing German air superiority. Maresyev's flight encountered 18 German dive bombers, escorted by 12 Messerschmitt fighters, while patrolling east of Orel. The numerical odds were prohibitive, but tactical circumstances prevented withdrawal without abandoning critical ground positions to unopposed attack. Engagement became mandatory despite overwhelming disadvantage. Rather than attempting to engage the entire formation simultaneously, Maresyev used terrain masking and cloud cover to position himself advantageously relative to the bomber stream. He waited until escort fighters had committed to protecting their charges before attacking with devastating precision and perfect timing. 2 Junkers Ju-87 dive bombers fell to his guns in rapid succession, their crews unable to react to his unexpected attack vector. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds, but its psychological impact on the German formation was immediate. Escort fighters abandoned their protective role to engage him directly. Maresyev used his aircraft's superior low-altitude performance to escape into friendly territory before the escorts could organize effective pursuit. His tactical success demonstrated principles that would influence Soviet fighter doctrine for the remainder of the war: patience, positioning, and precision over aggressive confrontation. The victory earned him recognition throughout the aviation community as proof that disability need not compromise military effectiveness. His achievement transcended personal triumph to become symbolic of Soviet determination and adaptability under desperate circumstances. By war's end, Maresyev had accumulated 7 confirmed aerial victories and numerous ground attack missions. His combat record compared favorably with healthy pilots who had flown throughout the entire conflict, validating his belief that human limitations often exist in perception rather than reality. August 24, 1943, brought Maresyev the highest honor Soviet military service could bestow. He was designated Hero of the Soviet Union for exceptional courage and military effectiveness in combat operations. The award recognized not just his victories, but the inspirational impact of his achievements on other service members. The ceremony in Moscow attracted significant public attention. Maresyev's story had already circulated through military channels, creating a legend that transcended his actual combat record. Here was proof that Soviet citizens could overcome any obstacle through determination and proper revolutionary spirit. Stalin himself presented the Gold Star Medal, though their conversation remained brief and formal. The Soviet leader seemed more interested in the propaganda value of Maresyev's achievement than in personal details of his struggle. The pilot understood his role in the larger narrative about national resilience. Public reaction proved more complex than official celebrations suggested. While most citizens admired his courage and tenacity, some questioned whether resources spent on his rehabilitation might have been better allocated elsewhere. Combat medicine faced overwhelming demands, and every success story implied countless cases where similar efforts had failed. Maresyev handled celebrity status with characteristic reserve. He gave required interviews and made scheduled appearances, but avoided elaborate personal narratives. His focus remained on flying duty rather than public relations activities. The international press discovered his story through Soviet media reports, creating worldwide fascination with the legless ace pilot. American and British publications presented him as evidence of human potential triumphing over physical limitations. His achievement became a symbol of Allied determination against fascist aggression. Military aviation communities studied his case for practical insights about pilot rehabilitation and aircraft modification. His prosthetic adaptations influenced design improvements that benefited other disabled aviators throughout the world. Within the Soviet Union, Maresyev's story became required reading for students and military personnel. His example was presented as proof that proper socialist attitude could overcome bourgeois concepts of human limitation. Victory in 1945 left Maresyev facing civilian life for the first time in his adult experience. The transition from combat operations to peacetime routine proved surprisingly difficult. His entire identity had become centered around flying and fighting, leaving little foundation for normal social existence. The Soviet Union offered him various positions suitable for a decorated war hero: administrative roles in aviation development, teaching positions at military academies, and ceremonial duties all provided comfortable alternatives to active service. Maresyev accepted some obligations, but remained restless without operational flying. He married Galina Yasinskaya in 1946, finding in her the stability and understanding that his extraordinary circumstances required. She had worked as a medical technician during the war and understood both the achievements and costs of his military service. Their relationship provided the normalcy that public attention often disrupted. Parenthood brought new dimensions to his life. Watching his children learn to walk created profound emotional reactions that he rarely discussed publicly. The simple act of running and playing, activities he had taken for granted before his amputation, became sources of wonder when observed in his offspring. His work with disabled veterans established programs that helped other amputees adapt to civilian life. Maresyev drew on his rehabilitation experience to develop training methods that emphasized practical skills over emotional adjustment. His approach focused on capability building rather than psychological counseling. Speaking engagements at schools and military institutions consumed increasing portions of his time. Students and young officers wanted to understand how he had overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Maresyev tailored his presentations to practical advice rather than inspirational rhetoric. His health remained generally stable despite the accumulated stress of his injuries and prosthetic dependence. Regular medical monitoring detected no serious complications, though phantom pain from his amputations created ongoing discomfort that he learned to manage through mental discipline. The transition from active hero to living legend brought complications that official recognition hadn't anticipated. Public expectations often exceeded his human capacity to fulfill them, creating pressures that affected both family life and personal well-being. Writer Boris Polovoy encountered Maresyev's story during wartime journalism and immediately recognized its dramatic potential. The narrative contained all elements of compelling literature: individual struggle against overwhelming odds, physical triumph over disability, and ultimate victory through determination. Polovoy spent months interviewing Maresyev and other participants in his story. The writer's approach emphasized emotional truth over documentary precision, crafting scenes that captured the psychological essence of events rather than their exact chronological details. The Tale of a Real Man, published in 1946, became an immediate cultural phenomenon. Soviet readers embraced the story as validation of their national character and individual potential. The book suggested that proper attitude could overcome any obstacle, no matter how severe. Maresyev's reaction to literary fame proved characteristically reserved. He appreciated Polovoy's respectful treatment of his experience, but felt uncomfortable with the heroic portrayal that the narrative required. The real man had been more frightened and uncertain than his literary counterpart. International translations introduced global audiences to his story, often emphasizing different themes than Soviet editions highlighted. Western readers focused on individual achievement and personal courage, while communist publications stressed collective support and socialist values. The book's success created expectations that Maresyev found difficult to fulfill in person. Readers expected to meet the confident, articulate hero that Polvoy had created, not the quiet, sometimes awkward man who had actually survived the ordeal. Film adaptations followed, bringing visual representation to events that most people could barely imagine. The cinematic version necessarily compressed and dramatized elements of his story, creating further distance between legend and reality. Educational adoption made Maresyev's story required reading for generations of Soviet students. Young people learned his example as proof that individual will could triumph over any circumstance when properly directed toward collective goals. Critics debated whether the literary treatment served or distorted his actual achievement. Some argued that fictional elements enhanced the story's inspirational value, while others insisted that reality needed no embellishment to impress readers. Decades of retelling transformed Maresyev's story into something approaching folklore. Details accumulated that had no basis in documented fact, while verified events sometimes became distorted beyond recognition. The legend gradually separated from the man who had inspired it. Some accounts claimed he had shot down significantly more enemy aircraft than military records actually supported. These inflated tallies reflected public desire for superhuman achievements rather than documented evidence. Maresyev himself never disputed such claims publicly, but maintained private accuracy about his actual combat record. Conspiracy theories emerged, suggesting that his rehabilitation had received secret foreign assistance or experimental medical technology not available to other Soviet citizens. These stories reflected incredulity that standard 1940s prosthetics could enable his achievements, ignoring the role of exceptional personal determination. Alternative versions of his 18-day survival story included elements of supernatural intervention or assistance from partisans that historical evidence didn't support. These embellishments served narrative purposes, but obscured the genuine human achievement that his solitary endurance represented. Medical professionals occasionally questioned whether his injuries had been as severe as official accounts suggested. Such skepticism reflected discomfort with the implications of his success, rather than legitimate doubts about documented facts. Hospital records consistently supported the original descriptions. Political interpretations varied according to the ideological needs of different eras. During Cold War tensions, Western commentaries sometimes presented him as propaganda creation, while Soviet accounts emphasized his achievement as proof of socialist superiority. Neither approach adequately addressed the individual human story. His family worked to preserve accurate information about his life and character while respecting the inspirational value that distorted versions provided to many people. They understood that legends often serve psychological needs that facts alone cannot fulfill. Modern research has generally confirmed the essential accuracy of his story, while dispelling various mythological additions. Historical documentation supports the fundamental events that created his reputation, even when specific details remain debatable. The persistence of his legend suggests that certain human achievements transcend their historical context to become permanent symbols of possibility. Whether or not every detail precisely matches documented fact, the core message about overcoming limitation continues resonating with people facing their own obstacles. Maresyev died on May 18, 2001, having lived to see his story inspire multiple generations. His funeral attracted thousands of mourners who recognized him not as a perfect hero, but as evidence that ordinary people can sometimes achieve extraordinary things through persistent effort and refusing to accept defeat.